the nice suits to my house, we'll have a discussion. And if the option is you're going to kill me, many near-death experiences are coming back and say they saw.
We are here today with Mark Fiorentino, and Mark has an impressive professional career, having worked as a troubleshooter for tech companies such as IBM and Harris Government Systems. He has also developed an award-winning, state-of-the-art software program that solved problems related to failure analysis of electronic assemblies and computer systems. But what I think is most interesting about Mark is how he got his start in this field when he was just 9 years old. And he was first introduced to Albert Einstein's idea of the unified field theory. Mark spent many years intensively researching this field, which resulted in developing his own theory of everything, which is laid out in his book called Master of Reality. So welcome, Mark. We are so excited to have you join us, and we're looking forward to a very informative discussion about reality and what exactly is that?
Okay, I'm looking forward to it as well. It's a fascinating topic. I spent 4 years writing a book about it.
So it sounds like you have a lot to offer as far as wisdom and information, and we're excited about learning more about that today from you. So I do understand that you share a birthday with Mr. Albert Einstein, who has sort of been one of your mentors as it relates to the unified field theory, which is one of the topics that you discuss in your book, The Master of Reality. So I think that's probably a good place for us to start. So if you could maybe share with us, what exactly is unified field theory?
Well, Einstein's version, the original unified field theory, is actually a very simple concept. Basically, electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. And what they're talking about there, when they say fundamental field, they were referring to in times before 1905 of a thing called the aether. In other words, space. And this ether was described as a quasi-elastic solid. And so that would be the fundamental field. So all of outer space, all everywhere, wherever you can see, wherever you can go, is made of this primary foundational substance. And it's a continuous field. It's when I say solid, I mean solid in the sense of that which is continuous. It is not made up of parts. So electromagnetism and gravity are different bendings, twists, and compressions of the fundamental field. Those are the forces. Those are the primary forces of nature. So just trying to figure out a way for people or the scientists to get to gravity from electromagnetism. He was looking for the connection. Somehow electromagnetic devices had to create a gravitational field. And that's what he was searching for. That's what I continued searching for and found. Yes, he was right. Indeed, electromagnetic particles move in a certain way to cause the gravitational field. So that's basically it. That's the unified field theory.
Simple. So I'm just curious, because when you were talking about the ether a moment ago, the first thought that I had was, is that consciousness?
Yeah, and I've been exploring that through studying and researching NDEs, near-death experiencers, intelligent design theory. So I'm going to go to the foundation, and in the process of going to the foundation, you have to go and ask the creator, how does this thing work? Because it's the creator. That's what I used to do at IBM when I had problems with defective electronic card assemblies or whatever, or programs that didn't work right. I would go to those creators and ask them to explain how it works. Well, by going to NDEers and some very good psychics and mediums, I was able to explore that avenue which you just introduced. In other words, is the ether, everything, God consciousness? And I do believe it is. God is in everything, in everyone, and we are in him. There, we are connected. So this is where science begins to join back to the spirit realm, because that is the place or the person who is the originator of all things, all matter, all energy, all beings, all life, all planets, all stars, everything comes from the source. So, yes, I would say that the ether is part of a God consciousness or a universal God consciousness.
And I think you actually bring up a really good point there when you talk about science versus the spirituality side of things. But I do think it's an important point to make, because I feel like that's a piece of the conversation that sometimes is left out of the overall conversation, right? Especially as it pertains to people of a scientific mindset. They sometimes dismiss the spiritual side of things. And I really think it's a merging of the two that is what really consciousness is. And I know you've got some ideas around that as well. So could you maybe share a little bit more with us about your thoughts on that?
Well, scientists adhere to their dogma. This is a big problem, but they got spanked pretty hard when the UFO images started coming out, and it was proof beyond any denial that they were wrong about UFOs and the existence of extraterrestrials. They had to start to track back and admit, well, oh, okay, maybe, yeah, the government even isn't denying it now. This is the beginning of getting them to open their minds. You know, there's a lot of scientists that go on the air and they speculate in a way that sounds like they're talking about facts, and they're not. And we're just going to have to bang away at them to get them to open their minds. And hopefully, as more people become aware of the reality, the bigger reality, the spiritual realm, and all the other beings in this universe, which is teeming with life, that old school thinking needs to crumble and be put aside, because they're getting in the way of the rest of us, because they're just, oh no, it's not that way. That's no proof. There's plenty of proof. You're just not accepting it, and you're getting there. We're opening their minds, and we can paint them in the corners now, more now than ever. And it's getting harder and harder for physicists and scientists to really make sense, because their main tool is quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics at the heart doesn't make any sense at all. So they have no explanation for anything. So the rest of us guys who are working on the foundations, the metaphysics, are coming up with the answers, and it's getting harder for them to make arguments against them, because they have nothing on their side to counter with.
You brought up a really good point about UFOs and obviously extraterrestrials as part of that conversation too. And I've definitely been a believer of other societies beyond the human society on other planets. But a lot of times when people, I talk about this with friends, they'll say, well, prove it, show me, prove it. And the only response I can give is you have to do the research yourself. I mean, I can't prove anything. I'm not going to materialize an alien in front of you. So you've just got to go out there and do the research. But the information is there if you are interested in looking for it. And I think, to your point, the government is finally stepping forward and acknowledging that this information is available to the public as well through, the disclosure of, let's say, David Grush, who came forward, in Congress and actually spoke, about what he knows behind the scenes. And that is what a lot of people need to hear and see, unfortunately. And I think we need more people stepping forward with that information. There's not enough of that right now, but I'm hoping we're kind of on that precipice of what's to come. I think more people are feeling more comfortable about coming forward with this information.
Yeah.
Continuing on that, Mark, you're really important, and here's why. This is why I was excited to talk to you. You are the bridge. You're giving me the knowledge and the information to make the jump, the leap to this is real. Very religious friends. They're Protestant, Catholic, Jewish. It's hard for them to make that leap into what you're discussing. And you are so awesome that you're sitting here doing all this work for us to let us be enlightened. Because I think people would really like to hear what that background. And we know that you are incredibly smart, but the spiritual and the religious background, which makes you unique.
Well, you really hit the nail on the head. I am in a unique position. That's why I'm on these podcasts, and I have this story to tell them why I wrote the book, because of the spiritual connection that guided me to doing the work I'm doing now in my retirement years. I mean, I was doing it all along since I became familiar with Einstein, and then I became fascinated by UFOs as a teenager and said the unified field theory is connected to UFOs because they're using a field of some sort to guide and propel their spaceships. So the two must be connected. So working on a unified field theory has eventually guided me to anti-gravity and faster than light travel systems. And all of this is all interconnected with the spirit realm. And so my unique position is a strange and obscure type of mission that I seem to have agreed to, as we all do. We all have missions, life plans that we agree to before we're born. I learned this from my near-death experience studies. Lots of people have recounted that their before life experience, how they're prepped and prepared, trained to come down to this planet or their planet or another planet or whatever to carry out missions and tasks. And my mission apparently in this realm is to bring forward the knowledge of gravity, anti-gravity, and space travel. So I'm working toward that with a plan and embracing it and just saying, this is what apparently all these psychics and mediums have said all these years, that I was kind of just saying, okay. Yeah. But the connections have come to pass, and they've been proven right. And more things keep happening. There's a lot of strange things that happen to somebody when you open up and accept there is another side. There are guardian angels there, and they're trying to help us. Not just me, everybody's got them. And I'm started to listen to mine finally after all these years. And that's what's gotten me on this path. And I know this is what I need to do. And you're right. Someday when I'm ready, when I've completed all my technical tasks, which I'm still working on, then I'm going to take it up a notch and start appearing in places, conferences or whatever. But I'm right in the middle of conducting some really breakthrough experiments in a lab in my garage, for God's sakes. I mean, this who does this? Not many people, especially old retired guys. But the ideas keep coming. I buy the equipment on my own. I take some donations if somebody's, interested. And I buy test equipment. I buy parts. I construct devices, and I'm working on anti-gravity experiments right now. That, coupled with other things I'm working on that are of a secret nature right now, I'm going to come up with the thing that people have been asking us for. I'm going to come up with proof, evidence that's undeniable, that's going to be on video. And you say, explain this away. And they're not going to be able to do it without looking like fools. Because The first thing I do when I do my experiments is try to say, how can I explain this measurement as not being what I think it is, but something else that is mundane and not really important. And so I'm constantly testing the system, and I have found faults in my setup earlier on, and but I still keep going back, and these measurements, these strange, unusual measurements, continue to persist that point to the discovery of anti-gravity and a new form of gravity, which I call gravity 2, which is a linear type of gravity that exists within dipoles. What are dipoles? Dipoles are positive and negative, north and south pole of a magnet. Those are dipole structures. And just so happens that UFOs use the same structures. Either they're magnetogravitic, which means they use high magnetics, or electrogravitic, which means they use high voltages. Both are dipoles. That's no accident. That's no coincidence. And in my studying of UFOs over the years, I noticed that, and I says, hey, this means something. And so I, along with that and some of my experiments, I made some important discoveries, of which a paper I just released not long ago, just a few weeks ago, that explains the cause of particle motion coming from the fact that dipoles create this with the mathematics. Now, this is pretty good coming from a guy that was never really that good at math. And yet I seem to be able to work these equations out using a technique called dimensional analysis, which just basically is a way of getting forces from one type to energy, to matter, mass, back to force. When you can do this, when you can manipulate the starting element to the other element that it needs to be, you get equivalences of force, energy, and mass. That's the key to unified field theory. That's the key to the discovery of anti-gravity and gravity 2. So here we are. So I'm working on these projects right now. Somebody's got to do it. I guess I'm the guy that's going to have to do it.
Wow. So there's just so many directions we can go with that. But first, what I wanted to ask you about was, first, where did you come up with the knowledge for this information? Like you said, you aren't the best at math, although you have to be pretty good. So where was the origination of the academic side of what you're doing with this math? Because this is very complex math that you're working with. So did you go get a degree for this, or are you self-taught with this information?
I am primarily self-taught. I did take some math classes in community college, of course, and in tech school. I remember thinking, I'm going to be able to use this someday. When I learned a technique about things like certain algebraic things, like finding the slope of an equation or a line of equation having points, I generate data points, and I was able to use those data points to come up with a formulation for this paper I got now. And I used that from some simple classes way back when. And somehow, intuitively, I knew this is the stuff I needed to learn, and I learned it well. And so primarily, I am self-taught. And in a way, that's a powerful method, because you don't get indoctrinated into a way of thinking that the traditional school systems want to ram down everybody's throat, especially in the graduate areas, postgraduate areas. They say, if you want to learn physics, you want to know about physics, you better use quantum mechanics. And if I had went up that route, and if I had learned that, I would have never gotten to where I am to do today. I would have never studied field theory like Einstein did. I just basically studied Einstein. I studied his works. I read a lot of his papers. read his biography many times over, fascinated, and took everything I read technically to heart, especially in the years of before 1905. And all these other guys I studied, like Lorentz and Maxwell and Faraday, I to them as they try to explain things, reading their papers where they're talking about what the model is. You have to have the physical model in your head. This is the road to discovery and knowledge. You just can't make stuff up with abstract modeling and thinking just on its own with no basis in a real physical material world. And that's the difference between what Einstein was always doing, even though he tried to cover things that, oh no, this is not real, but it is real. You know, he went back and forth flopping about the ether and everything. So how I got all this knowledge was I kept thinking about it from the age of 10 till right now. Every TV show I watched, if you know, does this have anything to do with anti-gravity? Star Trek, you know, they're explaining the warp drive. Does this have? What is their explanation? Does it make sense? Well, I never really had a good explanation, but it's a constant process that went on over many years, and my knowledge just sort of matured in since the day I retired, and I gave my full attention to this study that I'm doing now, writing the book, and then the aftermath of what came after the book. So it's been a lifelong process, which I basically self-studied because I love to study the nature of things. I want to know how things work. So basically, at the heart of all this is curiosity.
Now, I know there have been people in the past that have also tried some of these experiments, and the experiments never saw the light of day, even though they may have come up with answers, right? Certain people that may be in the government, let's say, didn't want this information to come forward, or maybe some of the large corporations. So do you ever feel a sense of fear around what you're doing, since you're kind of it sounds like at the point of full discovery here? Is that a concern to you at all?
Yes. Yeah, it is. But somehow I was put here to do this, so I'm going to continue. And on a lot of these shows, I'll just speak right directly to the U.S. Air Force and say, you want me to stop? You send a couple of the colonels or whatever with the nice suits to my house. We'll have a discussion. And if the option is you're going to kill me or I stop, either way, it's going to stop me. So I guess I'll stop. But nobody's approached me, and I'm praying that continues. What I'm hoping is that maybe they're saying, well, this is a legitimate thing this guy's doing. He's worked hard to do this, and he does. They must know that I have the right math, because things I found in the works of other people, like Thomas Townsend Brown, who I just recently discovered my equations that I'm working on now for electrogravitics match his.
Oh, wow.
When I saw that, I got chills. I says,
Yeah.
you know why he's using that equation? He understands. He wouldn't have picked that equation unless he understood how this is working.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that they'll allow me to continue unaffected, because maybe this is the way that disclosure happens.
I was just thinking that, Mark. I was just thinking you're almost doing the work for them to have disclosure.
Yeah, because once anti-gravity comes out, that opens a huge door, because immediately the person or persons, whoever develop anti-gravity machines, also simultaneously develop devices that can travel beyond the speed of light. And I'm not just talking a little bit beyond, not warp 8 like on Star Trek. That's minuscule. That you can't get anywhere at warp 8 or warp 9. You have to go warp 2,000, 10,000, actually 20,000 times the speed of light will get you to star systems in a few minutes, or get you across the galaxy. You can't just go at the speed of light. You have to break that light speed barrier. And this technology, at the same time you develop anti-gravity, the bonus prize is you get faster than light space travel once you use the thing that I call the slip wave. Once you're inside of that, you are the master of reality. Whoever has that is the possessing of the technology of an advanced race of people. That's when you go to that level, you're going to go to the stars, you're going to meet other civilizations. And anti-gravity is the road to that. The unified field theory, that final solution. I mean, does the government, they have to stop and think, do they want to kill Einstein all, like they would Jesus or somebody like that? Maybe. They've stopped a lot of other guys. I've talked to some of these guys, and the rest of them are just gone. And they play pretty rough. And sure, that does concern me, but I'm on a mission, and I will continue to hold that course until somebody fires a shot across my bow or something else serious happens. This is just what I came to do, and maybe they know that somehow.
So that actually is the perfect intro to my question. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, what are your thoughts on, some people seem to think that what we see in the skies these days that we consider a UFO or UAP, I guess is now what we're calling it, is really our own developed ships, that actually we have already developed anti-gravity. And it's just being kept under wraps by the government or whoever is in charge of all this. What are your thoughts around that?
I'm sure they have already reverse engineered. If they have the equation in what's his last name? The guy that worked for Skunk Works talked about that they have this technology, all right? And they can go to the stars. And he mentioned an equation that they didn't have quite right. I believe I may have that equation now. It governs the speed of light. And in fact, it does, I call it the constancy equation. And you have to run, see, we're dealing with forces and energies now, and I've got it all in my head, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get it out that makes sense. And it's a little difficult without me having the program. I put it in a program, and you can execute the equations one by one and follow the number as it transforms from one type of energy to mass to whatever. But there's an equation in there that I discovered, I call the constancy equation. And it makes the speed of light always go at the speed of light, no matter what its frequency. Well, that has to be working also in the anti-gravity machines. That's the function. You have to have that one so that you get the right number for when you're adding energy of either magnetic or electrostatic to make your craft go. You have to funnel it through that equation. And eventually I use that equation to create the photon. In other words, I can create a photon mathematically by picking its size, what its wavelength is, which determines its energy. And the energy is what determines its mass, which is what determines its velocity. Put into Newton's equation. I don't know how I thought of that, but it's really clever. When I use Newton's equation, I get the velocity for the speed of light from a dipole, which is what the photon is. So it all interconnects nicely, neatly, and I can make the photon any wavelength I want, which should make it go at different speeds because you get different energies. But that's not what we observe. All photons, no matter what wavelength, go at the speed of light. So that was a key equation to get. So it's a lot of technical work here, but as long as I keep it together and I keep writing papers, they're progressing. Now, first I found the quark speed. Why I even bothered that in 2015 is kind of a mystery to me. I was obsessed with finding out what speed the quarks moved inside of the neutron and the proton. I wound up, I needed that number for the next paper. And years later, it says, I need to know the velocity in order to compute the mass of the particles as they're moving within the neutron and the proton. I was the one that I did the math. It was all Lorenz's math. I didn't have to really develop new math.
It sounds like you're almost taking information from all of these other predecessors and just bringing it together in a way that they didn't have the ability to do back then. And now that we have the internet, we have access to all of this information where they were kind of off in their own corners of the world doing their own thing, or maybe at different points in time, right?
They had the right model up into the year 1905. And in my book, I say they made a big mistake with the Michelson-Morley experiment that turned them away from the ether. All that math that I'm using was based with people who believed in the ether, something out there that was continuous, all on Newton's equations, continuous. And so I'm doing what Einstein predicted. I used a rank 2 tensor to come up with the explanation for gravity. And the formula I used comes back from all the way from Newton's time. And I looked it up. I says, I wonder if it's a rank 2 tensor. And sure enough, that equation was a rank 2 tensor. So once again, Einstein keeps getting things right. So I definitely, listened to my mentor and Lorenz, who was Einstein's mentor. And these guys had it right. And we lost our way after the year 1905 because we were convinced that the ether didn't exist. And I go into my book and explain why the Michelson-Morley experiment was completely misinterpreted because of a wrong assumption that was built into the design of the experiment, which led to a misunderstanding of the results. They made the measurements accurately. I don't question that at all. They didn't find an ether wind. They gave up on the ether, and that was a big mistake. But all my math, all of it is ether-based math. Maxwell's equations, all of Newton's stuff, all of Einstein's stuff, even though he goes back and forth. He really deep down believed in the ether. And he says it in his speech in 1920. According to general theory of relativity, space without an ether is unthinkable. For in such space, there not only would be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time, measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense. A lot of people would ponder those statements. Over the years, I come to know those and understand what he's saying there very deeply and intimately. I know exactly. If you believe that, Einstein, you believe in the ether, because it's exactly right what he says, especially about no space-time intervals. You can't have space-time intervals if there isn't a real thing that you're traveling across in outer space. In other words, lots of people, physicists, think that space is made of nothing. There's nothing there. Nothing could be further from the truth. It takes light about 8.5 minutes to get from the sun to here. The only way that's possible is if there's something in between here. There's something that it's traversing through and within. Otherwise, it would take no time. And we never see light take 0 seconds to get from here to the sun. So
on that topic of space-time, because that was something I wanted to bring up and ask you about. I know I've heard this many times in the past when I've watched other videos and done research, that time doesn't exist, right? That's what people always say. Time doesn't exist. It does exist for us here on Earth in the sense that we measure it. But in terms of it actually existing, I understand the concept that it doesn't exist. It's a man-made construct for us to manage where we are in our day or our life. But I always struggled with that concept because they always say there's no past and there's no future. Everything is now. There's only the present moment, right?
correct.
If that is true, then that means everything has already happened.
Sort of.
And that's the part I have a hard time with. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around if there's no past and there's no future, and then that means everything has already happened. So I don't know what to do with that, because then what is the point of everything? If everything has already happened, what does anything matter?
I've explored that avenue many, many times. And you can't really use the science stuff. It's very limited. It keeps you, we exist on a time segment. We were born into this time segment, and we exist for as long as we do within this time segment. The problem is that not only is there this time segment, if what I've discovered, there's infinite amount of universes. Now things are starting to get complicated, and there's now probably infinite dimensions
and different physics on each universe.
Yes, yeah.
Well, right?
There's no reason why there can't be all different kinds of laws that work for creating life in different ways and different material existences. So now, what about time? Well, time gets tricky because we are talking about something that physically does not exist. You cannot hold it in your hand. So it's not a thing. But it emerges into this material reality because one thing has to exist in order for time to emerge and be something we can experience. And that thing is space. If you don't have real space with real distances that are made of something, then time is gone. Because all of a sudden, if I want to travel from here to there, and there's nothing between this point here and that point there, all of a sudden it's instantaneously. Now time is gone. Now all time becomes one moment. It's eternal, which is what spiritual people and people who have near death, they experience that, because more than likely that realm is not at all physical. It's pure consciousness, pure God consciousness, interconnected with all the individuals that were created by the God consciousness. It's a whole nother system of reality that's so different than here. And we're stuck in these bodies, and we're confined to this thinking and used to this, experience of time and materialism. And it's very hard for us to get these concepts that are much more, I guess, abstract in a way, but there's a lot of complications because the future spreads out into what might be an infinite amount of possible existences that could happen and are being determined by current and past decisions, right? So our timeline is moving this way and that way, along with all the others that are coexisting with it, all moving in the future. And this becomes very difficult because to think about, as we're finite beings and we're dealing with infinite, we're dealing with eternal types of structures and existences. And it becomes very hard to wrap our minds around. It gets circular. And then you get kind of dizzy, literally, sometimes thinking about it. but I'm thinking that time here, and I talk about it in the book, I try to just stick to here, and but accept and realize that when you're out of your body, you're outside of time, as is God. And in that bigger picture, you could look at all the timelines and all of future and past events and drop into anywhere you want. What I've noticed, and this is a clue, many near-death experiencers are coming back and say they saw the future. None of them match up. I believe they're sincere.
Could they be different timelines that they're each witnessing?
They're seeing versions based on the moment they had their near-death experience. Mm-hmm. That was the most likely future from that point. So when psychics and really gifted, super talented psychics have visions, or near-deathers have visions, and they come back and say, yeah, that's a possibility. So future thing going on there is very dynamic. And so it's really hard to know for sure what's going to happen. The only exception to what I've just said is as you scroll inward, in other words, if you're in current time and you're predicting an event that's 2 hours from now, the likelihood of you being correct goes very high. The further away you start predicting in time from, years from now, likelihood is very unlikely unless there's a lot of forces pushing toward that event. So that's why we don't get a whole lot of predictions long term that pan out.
Right. I know it's based on, it's based on the level of consciousness, right? And then also the vibration of that person in that moment. And obviously the other external factors that may come into play as well. Are you familiar with Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar?
No.
I think you'd find him really interesting. There's a lot that he shares about these different topics that we're discussing. And one of the things he mentions is that we are a different person moment to moment. Like it's almost like the flickering of a film, how it's just moment to moment. People use like a book analogy where they flip it open and let the pages kind of breeze open. And within each, like if you were to take like a sliver of moment of time out of that long film strip, it's so different from moment to moment that we are changing dynamically from moment to moment, that means that our past also changes in retrospect in relation to how we're changing as we're moving forward. So the person that you are today is not the person you'll be tomorrow, but that means the person that you'll be tomorrow doesn't have the same past as the person you are today. So it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, there is some people have theorized about the past being affected by present and future. It could be true. I'd have to give it some thought. I'm really firmly against going backwards in time and trying to fix things. I think that's a really bad idea. And I'm a little more warmer toward the future thing, but time travel, I don't work on. I don't try to figure it out. I just accept that I'm here doing the things that I need to be doing in this timeline to accomplish whatever needs to be done to get things going in the right path. Sort of like on a team. We're all kind of on a one team or the other. The good guys, God's team, or the guys that are making a lot of trouble. And there's loads of them out there, but they're much more asleep than we are. The people that wake up and are aware of the bigger picture tend to migrate toward trying to make things better and being good people and so forth. People that are just trying to do the day-to-day stuff and don't give any of this, what we're talking about, any consideration or all, are much more tempted to be what I call body mind thinkers. They just are material, and that's not a judgment. It's just an observation that it limits their thinking and their experiences and so forth. And we need to help everybody wake up. And that's what we're doing on these shows,
Yeah.
hopefully.
I know, just getting back into the science of things, I know you talk in your book about, or I believe you talk in your book about building a Stargate, or information you have about Stargates. Is that right?
Yeah. I did that.
Share a little bit.
I was actually told to do that. I hadn't planned on that particular chapter at all. I hadn't done this in like 30 years. I contacted a psychic from the old hometown where I used to live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I called her up and I said, look, well, I didn't ask the question. I held it back. And I said, just give me feedback. I got 2 questions and I'll eventually ask them. But I had to, talk to somebody that could talk to the other side, because they know everything, right? There is nothing they don't know about what's going on here. And if I could contact a legitimate psychic, and she gave me evidence that she was talking to the other side by talking to my parents, and they were saying things that only I knew and I understood. And so I knew I had the real deal. But in the process of that, this question of the book came up, because I thought I was just writing a book. I retired, and I said, I'm going to do something when I retire. I'm not just going to sit in front of the TV and wait to die. And I said, I'm going to write a book. I'll write a book about all these ideas I've had. And I'm not going to worry about how much time it takes. I'm just going to, every day I work on it from 2 to 6 hours. And every day I did. January 2nd, my first day of retirement, I started the book, and I was in the 3rd year of it when I talked to Tamara. And then things got really strange, because once I brought up the book and the theory of super relativity, she started to channel, and then all kinds of people started coming through, including Einstein, and I was like, what? And they said, you need to write this because the government is doing time travel already, and they're not very good at it. So I did write a chapter on Stargate, and that's how it got born, from all of that weird stuff that I just told you about. Through that channeling, they suggested that I write that, and I says, well, okay. And I started the chapter out with the only thing I knew for sure about Stargates. And said, I knew that if you build a framework like you see in these TV shows or whatever, you're going to have to accelerate light, electromagnetism, through that structure, that framework, so that's going beyond the speed of light. So what was interesting is the psychic mentioned a term. He says, you should look this up. And she said, fractal lenses. What the heck is that? So I looked it up. It's a real thing. And it's a little known thing that only physicists and material scientists know about. Fractal lenses. Remember at the beginning of the book, I said something's going to have to go faster than the speed of light in order to build a Stargate. So I look up the fractal lenses I get, and it's a metamaterial. A metamaterial is something that has weird properties. In other words, inside of it, it messes with 2 properties of space: permeability and permittivity. These are the things that can control and determine how electromagnetic fields travel through space. And if you drop those numbers to 0, why is that significant? C, the speed of light equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. The smaller that number gets, the faster the speed of light gets. You work it out. It's a well-known mathematical equation coming from James Clerk Maxwell. Probably one of the most important equations in history. And so these people make this metamaterial, they drop permittivity and permeability to zero, and they're claiming that light shining through it goes infinitely fast. That's what I said we needed in the beginning of the chapter. Something is going to have to go faster than the speed of light, and those photons shining through that material accelerate to ungodly speeds. And when they come out of there, they pack a punch. And if you vibrate the space with high, ultra high frequencies, because they're going to be compressed, the faster the light moves, the more the frequency compresses. So you've got something coming out of the framework that's causing space to vibrate violently and intensely. And that opens up the portal to the other time dimension or physical dimension. And that's what I discussed in detail in the book.
Well, Tracy and I happen to actually be experts on fractal lenses, so you're in luck.
I never heard of it before that day.
I had never heard of it.
I have, but just kidding.
I was 10 years old.
I am like super impressed. So how did you guys hear about fractal lenses?
We learned it in first grade.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've got me really confused. The brain is not.
We were kidding. We don't know.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Mark, I have a question for you. What are your thoughts on the government, our lovely government and military? And I think we've kind of touched briefly upon this earlier, but like them having this technology already, and have we already put people on other planets? Do you feel like we have people on the moon or on Mars? There are people that assert that we do have societies already on those planets and possibly many other planets. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm absolutely sure we have people on Mars. And just little things. Yeah. Well,
I have a hard time with that. That's one thing that I have a hard time with. But
I have very small amount of evidence.
Well,
The Mars rovers on Mars, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 of them. I don't know how many.
Right.
Keep breaking down. But then suddenly they start working again.
I never thought of that. Okay.
And not only that, but if you look at when it takes a picture of itself, there after time, there's Mars dirt on it, right? Then you go along and all of a sudden they're clean. Who cleaned it?
The Martians.
The janitor that's on the planet.
There's no way to wash it off. So just little subtle things like that, if you I'll watch all the Mars rovers and go around and I'll look at it and I say, that's all dirty there. You need to clean those solar lenses so that it gets power. All of a sudden they're clean.
That's interesting.
I want to know how that happened. And I want to know who the heck is fixing these things all the time.
They have windshield wipers.
Anyway, but and I can't think of that guy's name. I should have wrote him down. Rich somebody. He's passed away. Rich. Well, he's the guy that was the lead engineer for Skunk Works, where they were making the jets and everything.
Oh, yes, I can't think of the name either.
On one, he was at some college making a speech, and he just opened up and said, yeah, we got this technology. Mm-hmm. We reverse engineered them. We can travel to the stars. He says, we can take ET home.
Mm-hmm.
So
is it Ben Rich?
Ben Rich. There. That's the guy. Read the little article that he says. It's a real eye opener. And here's a guy that worked with the government. For some reason, he's allowed this one time to babble this stuff out. And it's earth-shaking stuff. I mean, if we could take ET home, now you're talking about, okay, they can go 20,000 times the speed of light, or at least 10,000. Okay, so they can get to Mars, even at the speed of light. It takes, 15, 20 minutes to get to Mars? Sure, they're on Mars. And probably a lot of other places as well. Are they building bases where we can see them? Absolutely not. But is there something there? Maybe. One of the cool things about these UFOs, or at least, and I've talked to several abductees who claim that the aliens are really friendly and they're teaching themselves they're teaching them things at night and so forth, that these UFOs can go right through solid matter, so they don't need a door to go, or a door thing to open up so they can go down into the tunnel. They can go right through and then come out right at wherever the base is, and they can just dematerialize the matter and dig caverns out, whereas we would have to, trucks, dirt moving up, coming out, and doing all this stuff. They can just form it and start using it. So maybe our craft, they have this feature. I don't know. That I don't know. But I know the alien crafts have that feature. And so to me, yeah, I do know this. I have as evidence, solid evidence, the most solid evidence I have. I was contacted after one of the many shows I was on. Somebody saw me, and this person and another person, there's two people who remain anonymous, who will continue to remain anonymous because they're afraid if they come out, because they actually work for the government, that they will come after them. Well, what these two people saw one night in the desert was a UFO. And they were able to get within inches of it. In other words, they could look at it close. It was like the size of a Volkswagen. The one guy was going to touch it. The other guy pulled his arm back, said, "Don't do it." But when they looked at the device, they saw markings on it. And the markings said, U.S. Air Force, experimental. So I know for sure they've got it. And this was back in the 70s. So imagine how much more advanced those crafts were. That was like a clunker. That thing made a lot of noise and did a lot of stuff. By now, I think they've probably settled on the easier type to build, which is the electrogravitic model, which doesn't require huge amounts of power, just huge amounts of voltage. And that's much easier to generate than the magnetic type. So yeah, we got these things. I'm sure, but can I take you to a place and show you one? No. Well, I'm convinced that we have. NASA has a whole department dedicated to doctoring the images. They take images of the moon. If there's anything there they don't want you to see, they, Photoshop it out. They even do it on pictures of them, not Skylab, but the space station, taking pictures down. You could see where they copied and pasted clouds, the same, to cover up something. The cover up is massive. It's got media's involved at all the major outlets, all the major news things. They have people, the NSA, the CIA, that they pay. They say, if you get a story about this, it doesn't make it. You cut it. I heard of one time where this guy said he could produce a UFO, he could make it come on demand, and the news team went out there, I think it was for NBC, thinking the guy was going to make a fool of himself. Well, he did whatever it was to make the UFO come, and sure enough, this thing starts coming over the horizon toward them. And then you hear in the background, they say, "We can't show this, cut away." And that was that.
Wow.
So you know what? They're in on it. They're not going to break stories unless they are allowed, stories that don't really clearly show evidence. They can talk about that stuff. And everybody's pondering, what were those lights in the sky? Well, yeah, you'll get those stories. But a clear craft coming up within visual range that you can see is not an airplane. It's not a balloon. It's something from another world. That's going to be covered up. Objects on the moon or Mars or whatever, they're going to Photoshop that stuff out. They've been doing it for years. They're going to continue doing it, and then the skeptics say, where's your evidence? Well, we have it, but they keep taking it from us. Our own government just, how many people come up with, hardware, even archaeologists that we don't know anything about. Maybe you guys know some archaeologists that made some great discoveries. Some of the UFOs that we supposedly picked up and reverse engineered were from archaeological sites. But somehow it never makes the news.
Speaking of the news, and just to throw a wrench in everything, I was watching the Tucker Carlson. Well, it was Lex Friedman, but he had Tucker on, and he's under the impression that a lot of these UFOs are coming from the water. In fact, he went one step further to say he had, I guess, a liaison in the government that sent him, whatever information, called Project Aqua. And have you seen that interview? It's on Lex Friedman. He just had it in. Yeah,
I'd love to get on that show.
Yeah, and he was talking about how these UFOs, he is 1 billion% like, this is happening. The government is not letting us know. They're covering it up, and that there's a whole universe in the water. And he went one step further to say they weren't nice. That this was like I don't mean to, I'm not trying to fearmonger by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just relaying what he said, that they were evil, and that we were lucky that they've been at bay for as long as they have.
Well, somebody's holding, if there are evil ones out there, somebody's holding them back to some extent. I mean, there's a lot of missing people every year, and who knows what percentage of those missing people are due to abductions. So they may be conducting their business and doing what they want with some of the people, the population. And I would bet we struck a deal with them to allow them to do that and for an exchange of technology.
That's what he's saying. That's what he said. I mean, and you're amazing. We are just starting. But when you have someone like Tucker Carlson, who's been in the media, who's been around the block and is pretty well known, also basically acknowledging what you're doing and what, we're all talking about in terms of the government hiding things, that's pretty prevalent.
It's been going on a long time, and mankind is mankind's worst enemy. We're holding each other back. You can worry about the aliens all you want, but they're not doing near the damage we're doing to ourselves. They're probably, there's nearly an infinite amount of other life forms out there. Some of them are bound to be bad guys.
Right.
But that in mind, I don't go, at some point, the military needs enemies to justify their existence. So at some point, they're going to claim there are aliens and they're evil. And, then we need the military to protect us from, these guys now. When we run out of people on Earth, Russia, China, or whatever, the only people left are the aliens. And then once again, we'll hear they're evil and, they're after us and, we have to fight them off with the Space Force or whatever. Here we go again. But I believe there are many good races out there, and I've heard many testimonies to that effect. And somebody, if they wanted to wipe us out, I think they've even said it. It says, all we got to do is grab a 10-mile wide asteroid and push it toward your planet. Not only you'll be gone, but all the animal life, all the plant life, all the way down to the bacteria will be gone. We could get rid of you. And they could do that at any time because they've mastered gravity. They could just easily put some ships behind something, push a big boulder at us, and let nature take its course. And in my book, I want to establish a space defense system where we're watching the sky, which we are already doing, but we could use the UFO technology to push objects away simply. You don't need a nuclear weapon. You just get a bunch of these drones and you fly them right up to the object. They all land on it and they all start to push and take the thing off course, guide it to the sun. Earth saved. This is a very valuable asset for our species to have, along with the other device I wanted to put up, which needs the drone technology. Blinds, space blinds, that can be turned to block the sunlight to whatever degree we need. That would put an end to the global warming problem. If we block the sunlight by just 2%, we'll have a drop in temperature of 1 degree centigrade. I had a guy do this over the internet. We computed this. That would put us back into the 1940s, somewhere in the 1930s, very cold winters that we used to have. And, that would make everybody happy, I guess. But, this anti-gravity technology has so many uses other than just space flight that could be used to save the world, to protect the world. Everybody, not just some people, everybody. And the sooner we get it, the safer we'll be. So that's my main drive, to get this stuff. I want IBM, I want Hitachi, I want Samsung, I want everybody building these crafts. I want these things to be commonplace. Buses, supercars, all going, hovering, going above ground, going 10,000 miles an hour. We'd have to upgrade the whole GPS system. But once you do that, they can fly safely without running into each other. And the beauty is we're already working on the technology for self-driving cars. This is going to scroll right over into the self-driving supercars, because you need that technology to guide these devices safely through the atmosphere. We need anti-gravity for our own survival, to protect us from the sun if it starts to burn too hot or has a mass ejection. I'll bet you other star systems have that. I bet you that's a common thing that gets built once you have the ability to bring the materials up into the outer space. Because you could do that very cost effectively with anti-gravity technology. Very cost. Do it with rockets, we'd bankrupt the world. You could never do it building that kind of structure, which needs to be millions of square miles across. You could never do it cost effectively. It would cost everything we have to put this stuff up there. So there's a lot of good reasons for us to have anti-gravity, and I'm hoping that the Air Force and the government just allows me to keep going, because day by day I get closer and closer and closer.
And Mark, what is your opinion on 0-point energy? Because I know that's another big topic of something that is hopefully going to be disclosed to us at some point. I know Hal Puthoff, who's a quantum physicist, was one of the very first pioneers in this area of discussion. And he always had come up with the idea that space is not empty, which is what you said earlier. It's full of energy. In fact, he had mentioned that there's enough energy in a coffee cup to evaporate the world's oceans. And that this 0-point energy is generated from the ether, which we talked about earlier. And that's really what Nikola Tesla called that. So I know you've done some work in this area as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I tried to build one of Tesla's designs, and I did build it, and it did succeed. And I generated a little teeny bit of energy. And I says, well, all I got to do is multiply this circuit, and it'll add up. But when I tried to hook them all to the same antenna, it wouldn't double the power. It wouldn't triple the power. It only delivered this small amount. So either there's something wrong with the circuit design, or there's something more than likely, I don't understand about 0 point energy. My device is very crude. I think there's guys out there that know a lot more than I do about 0 point energy that could do experiments. And I think it's fascinating. I think there is probably some ways to do something there. My main work has been in magnetic motors and trying to come up with a perpetual motion system. And I actually talked to somebody who I know personally, and some friends as well. He discovered a perpetual motion machine using magnets. He patented it, and there's where he made his mistake. The government came, Men in Black. I know him personally, and this was told to me by his friends. They came to his house. They took all his computers. They took all his equipment. They took his papers and said, "Stop working on this." And he was terrified.
That's scary. Very scary.
Yeah. So this is, I could tell you a story. Oh, yes, another one. I know somebody that worked for a power company. This person worked in the patents department. This person confided with me over lunch and said, "We have patents that would change the world for free energy devices." And I said, "Wow, really? What do you do with these things?" The person said, "We sit on them."
That is just maddening to hear.
So we've got, like I said, mankind is mankind's worst enemy. We're stumbling to trip each other over, and it's just never ending. It's in big business. The corruption is spread its tentacles in every part of the system. Gets stronger day by day, unfortunately. It's getting more organized, and I have no answer for that other than prayer.
Yeah. I do feel like we're heading in the direction of disclosure, though, because it was surprising to see that David Grush was allowed to come forward and speak his mind with what he knows. And I don't know if there's an alternative motive to that, or an ulterior motive, or if there's, an agenda behind that. But it does seem like there's more people coming forward, whistleblowers that have information and they're willing to share it, and kind of, just like you said earlier, don't care. Like, this is just what I'm supposed to do, and this is part of my mission in life, and I'm going to bring this information forward.
Right. Yeah, there's I have hopes. My hopes that maybe this is a planned disclosure, a slow, slowly increasing, little bits and increments at a time, to the point where, oh, well, maybe there is something, where people can digest it and accept it. You keep hearing about it a little bit more here and there, because they're letting some of these people talk. And the only question is, are they putting out information that's basically disinformation? And then we got to worry about that. They put out some valid, good information that we could all agree on is good, and then start slipping in little things to confuse the public and keep us in the dark. That I worry about a little bit. But the more we talk about it, the more it gets out there, more commonplace this becomes, the more of these shows hit the internet. Thank God Google doesn't block them out. The more people, the consciousness level just kind of keeps raising, and become more and more aware. And hopefully at some point, I used to have dreams where all these UFOs are flying overhead, and it's just big, welcome to the galaxy, welcome planet Earth. They're all just, it's a big celebration, and they're all over the sky.
Fireworks.
It's a real grand thing. I haven't had that dream in years, but maybe I would love something like that. Or they land like the day the Earth stood still, they'd land in the park and the guy comes out with his robot. That would be so cool.
That
But,
would be cool.
I have my own plan if I'm allowed to make it. We'll see. There are things brewing. I got things brewing.
I like that.
We need that.
What are your thoughts on, because we're talking about disclosure, Elon Musk, because he has stated over and over again that he has not seen anything. And in my opinion, if anyone has seen anything, because he has, his space program, he says over and over, I have not seen anything. I've seen nothing. So my question to you is two parts. One, do you think that, I'm not going to say lying, but do you think he's fibbing because he's being told to fib, and that's his way of being able to continue with the space program because he's being allowed to continue, so as long as he keeps quiet? And my second part is, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a deliberate lie.
Yeah.
Because in the space program business using rockets. And if we go to anti-gravity, he's out of business. Because we don't, rockets is laughable compared to anti-gravity technology. I mean, you can lift, massive objects into outer space for pennies versus millions that it would take to use a rocket. He's making huge money making rockets, so he's not going to say, and he's not going to be interested in anti-gravity technology because it's going to put him out of business. It's the same reason that power companies keep hushed up about new discoveries in power generation, because they're going to go out of business. If everybody has a little thing that's the size of a basketball that they could put on the side of the house and it generates all the power they need for free, who needs the power company? So the power company gets rid of the people that have those kind of things. The same deal with this guy. He's making his dough, and a lot, millions, building rockets, which is like a piece of crap technology compared to a UFO that could do the same work. I mean, pennies to the dollar. So he's lying.
Your answer. So, Mark, I've heard you speak on this before, and I'm just curious. I would love for you to let us know, what are your thoughts on Jesus? Who was Jesus, and what role did he play for us and our planet, and where is he now?
Well, Jesus is real, okay? And I get some of my information from Howard Storm, a near-death experiencer, who had very valuable inspiration. And it makes sense what he says. Jesus has not just been to this planet. He's been to every planet. The role, you see, there are people who incarnate and they have specialties. Jesus, the Son of God, whatever you want to call him. That's his role. That's what he does. He sets the path of people on that planet to a spiritual road. And according to Howard Storm, he's been on every planet, everywhere, and it's done the same thing. Has he been on the cross? No. That was probably unique to our planet because of our violent nature and our species and the way it so thoroughly misbehaves compared to most other species in the universe, which we'll find someday if we're ever allowed to go to anywhere else and experience other cultures, really other cultures. We're going to find that most of these beings are very peaceful and loving. Are there some bad guys out there? Probably. There's some Klingons out there or whatever. But they're held at bay, I'm sure, because if they wanted to conquer here, they could come any day and do it. So I'm thinking that that we just need to be open to the greater existence.
Yeah,
Well,
and I
thank you.
think as it relates to spirituality, because I think it would be nice to kind of bring it back home from where we started this whole conversation. I believe that you had mentioned in the past or in other interviews I've seen you do that you do have a belief in spirit guides and angels, and that you do feel that you have somebody or something guiding you in this process. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've had many encounters personally with my spirit guides. They even saved my life at one point, despite me not listening to them, which I'm sure really aggravated them. If they could get aggravated on the other side, my reluctance to listen to their warning almost cost me my life. Yes, there are spirit guides. Thank God for them. And I say my prayers to them pretty much every day, thanking them for all their guidance, all their help. And we all have them. This is not unique to, this guy or that guy or what. Everybody, all 8 billion people have at least one. Most people have 2 or 3. I have 2 that I know of for sure. And then there's walk-ins, other ones that come for this help or that help, like I'm getting technical help, right? Well, there'll be physicists more than likely to come in and guide me, and, however they do that, by putting thoughts in your heads or whatever. I'm not sure how that infusion process works, but everybody who is a creator uses this infusion process, what they call as inspiration, to create, to make pictures, to write music, to do math, to do whatever it is they're creating. That's an active, ongoing process. It's assisted by guardian angels. And my advice to the folks listening out there, invite them into your life. Say, I want your help. And that will magnify your help and what you get.
I think actually that's the perfect topic to end on. And I just want to ask you, do you have any final thoughts, any words of wisdom that you want to share with everyone listening before we wrap up?
Yeah, I like to go with Father Rick Wendell's comments. He talked to God in his near-death experience, and God said, I got one commandment for man: love one another. If we did that, just that, it would fix all of the world's problems, because we would stop hurting each other. We would stop all this covering up, all this stuff, because we would want what's best for our fellow man. And doing all this evil work is not what's best for our fellow man. If we just simply love one another, we would stop the fighting, we'd stop the stealing, we'd stop all the violence, everything. So my advice is to listen to Father Rick Wendell and say, love one another, or God, really. It's his commandment.
Absolutely. I think that's always a good word of advice. Just treat others as you would want to be treated, and you can never go wrong with that.
Yeah.
So,
Golden rule.
well, Mark, we want to thank you for your time today, and we really appreciate you spending this time discussing these topics with us. I think they're very interesting, and they're really important topics for people to hear about. And I know that you've got a website, you've got a book, and you've got a YouTube channel. So can you let the audience know where they can find those things for you?
Well, I've got everything centered toward the website, www.super-relativity.com, super-relativity.com. There's links to my papers, to my YouTube. Please subscribe to my YouTube.
I already am.
I need to get 1,000.
Yes.
We'll get you there.
I saw a donation. I saw a donation button there also on your website. So that's good too.
Yeah. Occasionally, very rare, but it's very much appreciated. There's people that say, I got to give you all right. Well, I'll put a button on here for you. Here's the button. And God bless them, they do. And it helps. But my main focus is just to plug along, bang away at these technologies, these experiments. Want to bring anti-gravity to the world, and that's really the main thing that I'm trying to do, and then unite religion to science. And I'm glad that you brought up Jesus, a being of supreme love and guidance, and a purely good human being who's our best friend. And people go to the near death during their near death, they find out they've known Jesus for all their lives, all their eternity. So God and Jesus and all the other wonderful people that are there on the other side, I love all that stuff. I'm continuing to study and learn about it. And I welcome the spiritual realm into my work. And that's definitely what I'm doing with my guardian angels. I'm saying, I'm going to listen to you guys. All the help you can give me, I'll take it. Thanks.
Well, you're certainly on the right track, and we really appreciate all the work that you've done and wish you much success in the future to continue this work. And we appreciate all of the information today. This has been very informative and very interesting, and we just appreciate your time. So thank you so much, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Mark.